Good morning, and thank you very much to all of you that are listening at the other side of the screens. I would love to talk to you in person, but yeah, hopefully we will be able to do it in the near future. And of course, thank you, Alan, for inviting me to be here today. So, for those of you that don't know Mobbeel, we are a company based in Spain that was founded 12 years ago in 2009, focusing since the very beginning on identity verification and specifically mobile biometrics. Probably we are not the biggest company in the space, but we certainly do have some experience in mobile biometric systems and how they have evolved in these past few years. And those are the reflections I would like to share with you today. How we have lived this evolution from our own experience and why it matters. So we started like many other companies focusing on just one biometric modality to verify the identity of the user. At that time, we did it with iris recognition, the modality that we thought it was far superior to any other biometric technology, especially in terms of accuracy. Bear in mind, this is 2009. We were working closely with Google even before the first Android phones were launched, and we started to develop a technology to recognize the iris of the user with an operating system that was not ready yet, with those processors and memory, regular cameras not designed for this purpose, visible light, and of course completely uncontrolled environment. So clearly we do like challenges. But there is a sentence that summarizes very well the result at that time is we didn't know it was impossible, so we did it. And indeed, we were able to scan the iris of the user with those early Android and iPhone models, tip cameras, and visible light. But soon we realized that in biometrics, there is no one-size-fits-all solution. And there is no, in our point of view, there is no single biometric technology that works for all the types of users, all the security requirements, all the environmental conditions, etc. So, for example, iris recognition can be very accurate, but most people just weren't used to it. So take also in mind, this is a pre-Touch ID and of course pre-Face ID era, so it was quite futuristic at that time. And I remember the reaction when the clients, banks, telcos, insurance companies, phone manufacturers, every time we showed the demo to them, the reaction was, wow, that's awesome. There's no doubt this is going to be the future. But it was exactly that. It was future, and we needed to pay the bills right then, not in the future. So we evolved and to the next stage, and we developed new technologies to be able to adapt to every possible type of client, to every use case, and to every situation. And this is one of the great advantages of multi-biometric systems, just flexibility. The other is increased accuracy and resistance to spoofing attempts. We would be talking later about that. But for me, probably flexibility is a key feature. So the reality is that if you have a very defined use case with a specific type of user in a controlled environment, probably you can find a single biometric modality that is right for it. But at the moment, you have several use cases that you want to cover, probably with different security requirements, with a wide range of users and an uncontrolled environment. and definitely that's the case when we are talking about mobile biometrics, then multi-biometric system is not an option anymore. It is a must. You need multi-biometric systems. I think there is no other option. So we developed different technologies such as facial recognition, voice recognition, signature recognition, which is more a behavioral trait, but still biometry. And we even integrated the existing biometric sensors on smartphones to make life of the developers easier. And a curious thing is that the development of these new biometric modalities sometimes opened totally new opportunities to solve our clients' problems. For example, every time we show to them the authentication with one of our technologies with signature recognition, the reaction was, "That's weird. I'm not used to authenticate or logging with my signature. But wait, we do have a problem to remove signatures on paper and still have some kind of legally binding signatures. So could we use this to solve this problem?" And yeah, so we adapted the biometric signature recognition to prove the identity of the user that was signing a document and create legally binding electronic signatures with all the guarantees, even with very tight regulations, and of course very easy to use. So you can use your biometric modality, signature or whatever, to not only to authenticate but also to sign documents, legally binding documents. And then the other big advantage that we got from adding several biometric modalities working together is that the systems became much more robust to spoofing attempts than those that were using a single biometric technology. For example, we have several clients using face and voice recognition simultaneously. It's very easy for the end user. You are just watching a screen and saying a sentence, and at the same time we are recognizing your face and your voice, and that increases significantly the difficulty for an attacker to succeed. So that's also an advantage. However, we soon discovered that not only biometric systems were evolving, but also the attacks were becoming more and more sophisticated, and so we have to evolve again. And the next step on this chain of evolution was the development of robust liveness detection or anti-spoofing techniques. So yeah, during the first evolutionary stage with a single biometric technology, the focus was mainly on accuracy, decreasing both false acceptance and false reaction rates to the minimum possible, and increase tolerance to different environments. During the second evolutionary stage with multi-biometric technologies, the focus was more on flexibility and adapting to different use cases, different users, different security requirements. And in this third evolutionary stage, the focus was more on increasing robustness against very targeted and sophisticated attacks. And so, yeah, we developed several liveness detection techniques to address these challenges. Some of them are passive, some of them are active. And again, we don't think there is a single best technique. And our approach is, again, flexibility to adapt to our client needs. For example, one of the techniques that our clients usually love is smile recognition. It creates a kind of positive mindset in the user. There's some positive emotional response when he or she is asked to smile, and it's really surprising the positive effect. We should smile more in our daily lives. But probably it's not the most robust one. So for high risk use cases, we ask the users to move their heads left and right, and we take images from different angles and so on. So our recommendation nowadays is usually a combination of passive techniques and active techniques, probably combine some kind of a step up scheme. So if the confidence with the passive techniques is enough, why asking for additional gestures? But if the system sees something that is not happy with, then yeah, we will need to ask the user for additional proof of life, always keeping convenience in mind. Not if we do the process very difficult, then yeah, probably the users will reject that. Then we were happy with the performance of our live detection technologies, and our clients started to challenge us again with new problems. So there are many use cases, you know, Alan talked before about that, and probably it's one of the recurrent topics where it's not enough to perform a matching between the captured samples and the stored biometric template during the enrollment. You need to go one step farther, and you need to prove the real world identity of that person, especially for many reasons, but some of them are for compliance and regulatory reasons. Some sectors, they really need to do that. So yeah, then that we evolved again and used our experience with computer visions, machine learning, artificial intelligence to verify the identity, but this time combining it with recognition of official ID documents to link with the real identity of the users. So now the focus on this evolutionary stage is the link with the real world identity. Yeah, nowadays this onboarding process seems pretty straightforward, but again, we were being pioneers and exploring new uncharted territories at that time. Probably the only similar remote onboarding systems were based at the time on a video conference with a customer service agent at the other side of the line. The verification was in a completely manual way, and it didn't scale well. So we adapted to it, and we created a fully automated system able to scan the ID document, take a selfie with liveness detection, and perform a biometric matching between the face of the user, the real person, and the picture on the ID document. And then we realized, again that these systems, these onboarding systems, were having a similar evolution to the previous pure biometrics systems. So the first iterations were based on accuracy, improving the accuracy of the OCR, the matching between the selfie and the ID document, which is a challenge, very tough challenge by itself, because it's difficult. But now that this stage was mostly solved, now the attacks were also evolving, and now we needed next evolution to develop anti-spoofing techniques, but this time not for the biometric traits, but for the ID documents themselves. So this brings us to this last stage of evolution, where our approach has been to develop multiple biometric techniques to detect many different kinds of attacks that we are seeing with ID documents. From very simple techniques that check the coherence of the information, in the MRC area, matching between different zones of the document, to very complex and advanced AI techniques that are able to spot modifications that a human eye probably wouldn't detect. But the most important point of my talk is why this evolution matters and how it helps our clients. And the answer is that thanks to this evolution and the development of these many different technologies, we are able to help our clients to verify the identity of their customers through all the different stages and use cases of the relationship with that client. And of course, in a very secure, convenient, and compliant with the regulations way. So let's see an example of what I mean by all the stages of the relationship with a client. So, for example, we could onboard the client verifying his or her real identity, scanning an ID document, and validating that it's an official one, it's authentic, it hasn't been modified. Then, yeah, we have some real identity to start. Then we can capture biometric samples of the real users, a live selfie, for example, to make sure the document is being presented by its rightful owner. And then at this point, we have established a link of that person that is in front, a live person that is in front of the mobile device with a real identity. And then we can take advantage of this to enroll other biometric modalities. Now we have the face, we can enroll it, but we can also ask the user to enroll the voice, signature, fingerprint, all these modalities to use it later for other purposes. So then at some point, it's probably that it's a new client, you are onboarding him or her. So it's probably that at some point you need the user to sign and consent to some documents. So you can use one of the biometric modalities. Signature, for example, is a very convenient one to sign legally binding contracts, conditions, and so on. And you can do it multiple times, not just during the enrollment, but you can do it during all the life of that client, all the relationship you will have with that client during probably many years. And finally, since you have enrolled the biometric templates of the user and you know those biometric templates are linked to a real identity, you could use biometric authentication later for many use cases, such as logging to the platform, authorizing transactions, making mobile payments, recovering lost credentials, lots of different use cases, and choose the right biometrics modalities for that specific use case, for that specific type of user you are targeting for that specific application. And all of this is working seamlessly and provided by a single solution that is covering all the steps. Well, that's the experience I wanted to share with you today. To conclude, I would say that, yeah, based on the evolution of the market, requirements from our clients, attacks that we are seeing in the wild every day, choosing a platform that provides a single biometric technology, even if it's a good one, probably is not an option anymore, except for very specific use cases. So at the end of the day, you need a solution that is able to cover the identity verification needs that your clients will face at different points of your relationship with them. And so basically you need a solution that can provide the same trust and I like the name of the event, Digital Trust World, because this is about trust. Yeah, the same trust when you are working remotely than when you are face to face. So yeah, thank you very much. And if you have any questions, I'll be delighted, and I'll try to answer them.
Okay, thank you, Jose. I've got a question about standards. Now, obviously,
yep.
You know, in specifically to IDV and ID verification and proofing, is there, you know, obviously I've just on the back of some pretty serious research in this area myself. So, you know, where are we into? So if I'm a service provider, if I'm a bank, for instance, and I'm using identity, you know, if I'm going out into the market and I'm thinking about, you know, buying such technology, are there any standards that I can use and say, okay, right, I'll benchmark against, you know, and I know we have, you know, AML5, we have, you know, EIDAS, we have some ANSI standards in France. There's FIDO working on our identity verification proofing standards. But so what, in your opinion, and you know, from building this technology, are you seeing?
Yeah, of course, there is some work, and you mentioned some of the options that are out there. But in my opinion, it's still it's not very mature. We need to evolve that on the standard side. We saw this 10 years ago with biometrics, when every time we talked with a client, say, okay, how can I compare your system with a different one? And the answer was really difficult, because every vendor has their own databases, their own benchmarks, their own way to measure things. Luckily, this has evolved a lot. Now we have standards we have like some shared databases to share to see this performance. We have standards to check the liveness detection. But I think we still need more standards in the area of ID verification when ID documents are involved. I think we still feel pretty much the same as 10 years ago with biometrics, that every vendor, we try to show why our system is able to detect some kind of attacks, how we do it, why it's better. But I think there is no clear way to compare apples with apples.
Yeah, I concur with that, really, and it's what a lot of people that we spoke to have, you know, also said as well. So I think it's definitely work in progress. I think, you know, there's been, you know, with certification for liveness detection, there is, you know, ISO standards, NIST standards, and FIDO as well. So it is moving in the right direction.
Yeah, definitely.
So I've got some more questions coming in from the floor. Thank you. Keep them coming in, please. There's one from, you know, since video is getting cheaper to fake, it makes sense to make anti-spoofing tools. So, and that, you know, it is, you know, deepfake attacks are very prevalent. And so, are you seeing attacks on your systems? And you know, is it prevalent? You know, for me, it's not a great scalable attack. You know, in terms, because you've got you know, it's device based, isn't it? So, you know, versus other attacks, it's quite a difficult one to do. But are you seeing evidence of attacks on live on facial recognition systems? And
most of the attacks we are seeing on facial recognition systems are more basic, more simple than deepfake attacks. Most of them are just using, the huge majority of them are using a picture or a video of the user and trying to spoof the system. Obviously, deepfakes are a real threat, and we need to be aware of them. But right now, what we are seeing in our clients is not. I mean, the magnitude of the attacks is really small. Then most of them, when you create a deepfake, you have to show it to the system with a screen, so we can detect not only the deepfake. We are working on very smart techniques with AI to detect deepfakes, but also we can detect the screens that you are using to show the deepfake. Yeah, but this is going to be a challenge for sure for the industry in the next few years. And then it's not only for obviously for the biometrics industry, but I think for society in general, we need techniques, good techniques, fast techniques to detect deep fakes as soon as they are released to the public, because otherwise the impact that they can have is huge. So yeah, that's one of the areas where we are working our research and development team is working very actively.
Okay. And related to kind of attacks, another attack is an injection attack, which is kind of, it's more of a cyber attack, isn't it? Kind of a side attack. So how big a problem do you consider injection attacks to be?
Yeah, again, and of course we have some measures to protect against this kind of attacks, but it is not something we are seeing very often in a while. As I mentioned, most of the attacks, most of the volume of the attacks we are seeing, they are not very sophisticated ones. They are just probably people that yeah, they want a credit, or they want to access bank accounts, and so so they steal an ID document from other person and they try to fake it, or they make a forgery of the ID document, but they are not really, most of them, they are not really sophisticated attacks such as injection.
Yeah, okay, that makes sense. So I've got another question here from, which I think we can lead on to another question about modalities and which one is best. So since all the modalities are reliant on the technology of the native device, and I think we need to clarify about your system, and that varies from user to user. What is your success rate of your onboarding processes? So perhaps to clarify, I think we're talking native versus server-based kind of biometric verification.
Yeah, I think the success rate, of course, depends on client to client, depends on the use cases, but usually it's very high. We are also seeing a movement from native applications to web applications, and now we are able to do it. We are able to have the same success rate with web applications than with native applications, and also we can access native biometrics in the device with you know, 5.2 standards. So the browser can access a native. So I'm not sure if I get the question, but yeah,
yeah, I think it's to clarify. So for ID verification,
yep,
device-based matching, or is it cloud-based matching?
Okay, we have both. We have the two different options, and again, it's about flexibility. There are some use cases where you need the system to work offline, to work without connection, and so in those cases it makes sense to do it offline on the device. And for some use cases, it makes sense to do it on the server side. But the accuracy of both approaches is basically the same.
Yeah. So we had a catch up 3 weeks ago now. We were talking about, you know, identity verification, and what was interesting for me was the use of video. And you know, and I think that's related to AML5, I think, and so how much of your work is kind of that use of the video rather than kind of you know, taking a selfie, and where are you seeing that adopted? And I know in Spain that's quite common. So perhaps you can give us a kind of an overview of where video is used.
Yeah.
Versus a selfie.
Sure. I think for us, video is a key component versus static images. And if you think it makes sense, because you have much more information in a video than in a picture, both for accuracy perspective and also from to detect any kind of attack or anti-spoofing. So definitely for us, it makes sense to use video rather than just static pictures. We can offer much better results. Then there, as you mentioned, for regulatory reasons, there are some countries, some sectors where video is not an option. It's mandatory. You need to store all the session in a single video. but yeah, we are using it in most use cases. We are using it because we think it can provide much more information. And 10 years ago probably was a big issue because network connectivity was not so good. Then yeah, you have to think very carefully how much data are you transferring from the device to the servers. But nowadays, in most situations, it's okay to use 4G connection, and you will have a very good video to transfer, and then you can do it a much more advanced analysis on the video than on a picture.
Yeah, very good. So it's interesting to hear your story, and you started off with Iris back in your kind of the early days of your company. Yeah. And I think Iris is considered one of the most accurate, but perhaps not the easiest to use. Expensive because generally you need specific hardware. You need infrared generally. So the million dollar question is which biometric modality do you consider the best?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think it's a tough one. And I don't have a definite answer. I think the answer is it depends. For me, it depends on three main factors. Depend of the type of user you are targeting. It's not the same skilled user that will use the system over and over again. That other user that is not so skilled, or maybe they will use the system once and not anymore. So it needs to be they don't have a time to learn how to work with it. So that's one of the things. The other is the security requirements. Let's not forget, biometrics is about security, but it's also about convenience. Sometimes we absolutely need convenience. And then the other is the environment. What kind of environment are you going to use it? So depending on these three factors, probably you will have some modalities that are more recommended than other ones. But yeah, it's difficult to say that one is best for everybody. That's why that's one of the reasons why we have evolved from just one modality to many others.
Yeah, no, a very good response. So talking about working with many technologies, in terms of do you orchestrate technology? Are all of them developed internally, or do you work with technology partners?
Yeah, that's also an interesting question. Yeah, the thing is that probably we are doing developing many technologies, and we are doing that internally. And the reason is, of course, that's a challenge, and to be able to work on so many different technologies. But this is a key advantage for us and for our clients. And the reason is that we do have the complete control on the roadmap of the technology. So we can talk with our clients, we can see what are their requirements, their needs, and we can adapt the roadmap to their needs because we have control on these technologies. We can also work with them very closely with the business model. Since we don't have dependencies with other partners, we can work with them to find the right business model that makes sense for the use case. We can work with them on that. And also, of course, again, it's very difficult. There are a lot of challenges, but there are some good things about working in so many different technologies. And sometimes you find synergies between some of them. When you're working with deep learning, with neural networks, with different techniques, sometimes you find that, okay, maybe this technique I am applying to face recognition can be applied also to voice recognition, or this technique we were using to detect spoofing attacks on face recognition can be used also to detect spoofing attacks on ID documents. So sometimes you find synergies and the ideas flow between the different technologies, and that's one of the good things.
Yeah. So another question from our audience. It's I know that we kind of mentioned about success rates for onboarding process, but is it something you can quantify? I know there is kind of metrics for onboarding, conversion rates, rejection rates, etc. False accepts, etc. So what does a successful rate look like for onboarding in terms of probably percentage?
Yeah, and again, it's difficult to say a number because it depends on the sector, on the client. And one of the things we do with one of the things that is different, I think, from most vendors is our solution is not it's not a black box that we capture information and then we output yes or no, and you don't know what's happening in the middle with technology or maybe even humans taking a look at that. With our solution, our clients, they have all the information and they take the decision. They are the ones who take who know the risk, and they are the ones who take, okay, this is a success and this is I need to reject this user. So for example, we have some clients or some use cases that are the risk is not very high. They don't have a lot of fraud, so the success rates are very high, probably up to 90% or more. And then we have some clients, or some use cases, some applications where the risk is very high. So they really need to be very strict with all the things they are capturing, all the metric, all the scores. And then in this case, probably, well, it depends, but probably it's 70%. But again, between 70, 90 plus, depending on the client, the rules they are implementing, and how specific, how is the risk for that use case.
Yeah, definitely. It's a risk management decision tied into usability and kind of, marketing. Do you want to, on onboarding, you don't want to turn customers away. So if you make it too difficult for them, but flip side is you don't want to make it too easy for the fraudsters to get in. So it's usability and you can probably write a kind of a formula for this in a way, based on your acceptable levels of risk and experience, customer experience, and on onboarding conversion rates, I think. So sure. I think related to that is in terms of accuracy, in terms of especially with, I think, document authentication, because if you're not using if you're not using the NFC to read the chip, then if you're using optical, the camera, and you're viewing that passport, and as an ex-employee of Delarue who's worked on passports, there's a lot of physical security characteristics that are printed and embedded onto that document that can be machinery or by a trained kind of border control guard, etc. So regarding ID document verification, many companies are taking an approach with humans reviewing pictures or videos on the back end and taking manual decisions. So what's your approach to this?
Yeah, thanks. That's an interesting challenge, and I think it will keep evolving in the next few years. First, one clarification I would like to do is we also have NFC reading for electronic documents with a chip, with an NFC chip. So yeah, we are using both techniques. We are using image capture with a camera, but for those documents with an NFC chip, such as electronic passports, or I don't know, for example, here in Spain, the Spanish ID document, Spanish ID card, they have an NFC chip. So we are able to read that chip with an Android or with an iPhone, and then you have a lot more security measures there. But focusing on the image of the document, I would like to talk about one of the previous questions. You were mentioning video. So video is also important here. It's not the same to authenticate just one picture that authenticate a video of the document. So if, for example, we are capturing a live video of the document, and we are using, we are playing, to say it, with the flash of the device. So we see how the light reflects on the ID document. We can see holograms, laser marks. Of course, we don't have the touch, we don't have the feeling of, but we do have a lot of information. It's much more information than just a picture, because we can see how the light reflects on those elements. And that's much more difficult to fake than just a single image. Even if the even if the document looks very real, as soon as the light reflects on it and you see how the light changes or doesn't change, the reflection, the patterns are very different from the real ID document and from a fake one. So of course there are a lot of things to evolve here and to improve, but definitely with video and the way the light reflects, we are much closer to a human face-to-face.
Yeah, just as an aside point, and it's mentioned in the next session with the ACCS and Tony Allen, is that he finds it, or a lot of people find it very difficult to get hold of good quality fake documents to actually test your systems against, because there's some stuff out there done by the professionals, stuff that it's going to cost you $500, that it's difficult to actually obtain artifacts to actually test your systems against. So yeah, it's definitely difficult, and one of the things that we benefit is, since these systems are in production in many clients, we can also see what's happening in real life, what are the kind of attacks we are seeing. As I mentioned, most of them are very basic, but some of them are, if you see, probably if a human sees just a picture, even a trained human, probably they won't be able to tell the difference with a real ID document. But then when you see, the machine sees the video, because there is no, I mean, there can be a human in our system, but usually our approach, our idea is to have a fully automated system, where the machine is able to analyze the video and see how things change on the document. Yeah. Then we are able to spot that it's not a real document. Okay. So within the EU, are there any states that require a manual check of a document?
Yeah, definitely. Definitely. Depending on the sectors and the regulations, there are most of them still require a human that is doing this manual, the final decision. For example, here in Spain, the financial sector and so on. You can have a very good technology, but at the end of the day, you need a human to take the final decision. But in my opinion, I think it's more a regulatory. Right now, it's more a regulatory issue than a technical issue. I really think the technology is going to be able to be with a higher accuracy than a human for these specific tasks.
Yep, thank you. So it would be amiss of me not to ask a COVID-19 question, because obviously we're still in the realms of under COVID's control, unfortunately. So have you noticed an increase in demand for these solutions during COVID-19?
Yeah, absolutely. I think, well, probably we can all agree there is, we have seen a lot of new sectors, new industries adopting this kind of technologies to prove identity in a remote way, especially for the onboarding purposes, also with authentication, but especially for onboarding, the way to check the real identity of the user. We have seen many, even regulation changes because some sectors, they couldn't do it because of regulatory reasons. And now these laws are evolving and to allow this kind of use cases. And I don't think this is going to change. I think hopefully situation is improving in many countries, but I think that there's no going back. I think if you can prove your identity in a secure way, in a convenient way, anytime, anywhere, why are you going to go back to a branch office to show your face or your ID document? I think this is probably here to stay. And yeah, definitely seeing more and more adoption every day.
Yeah, and from just to chip in from an analyst perspective, and to plug the report that's coming out next week, we know we're seeing, amazing levels of adoption, not just for the ultra regulated industries, the common ones like financial services, but government, because of the need to get healthcare systems, delivered to people remotely, and financial support through kind of like furlough schemes and business loans, etc., and also in hospitality and events. So it's just a snowball in terms of the adoption and sectors which were previously probably quite reluctant to deploy this technology, because it's available, it's relatively cost effective, it's being rolled out to a wide range of other sectors. So
yeah, definitely. For example, we are seeing a lot with hotels. It was very common that you arrive to a hotel and you have the queue in the reception, and you have to wait and sign papers and show your ID document. And and we are seeing lots of hotels right now adopting this kind of technology, so you can check in a remote way, and then when you go, you avoid all this contact and all these waitings and so on.
And it's a similar thing for air travel. And the another kind of claim that you can that someone can verify is your health status. So vaccination certificates and test results, etc. So yeah, it's a very adaptable kind of technology across a wide range of sectors. Yeah. Going back to kind of spoofing, we've got a question coming in, and we were talking about face and how it can be spoofed by simple systems that don't have live detection, and we've seen tons of YouTube videos about spoofing Face ID and other kind of device-based facial recognition systems. So other modalities, specifically voice and iris, are they more difficult to spoof? Is there a kind of a high bar financially to enact a spoof attack on voice or perhaps iris?
Yeah, each technology has their own challenges to spoof. Iris for sure is more robust to spoofing because it's harder to get a high quality image of your iris that you try to spoof. Voice, on the other hand, yeah, you have some. It's relatively easy to get the voice of another person, so in that sense it's more challenging. But yeah, you have just a different set of techniques. Usually with voice, what we use is we combine voice recognition with speech recognition. So we challenge the user to say something specific, and when we analyze, we say exactly that, and that changes. It's a challenge that change every time, and also there are some clever passive techniques to detect recordings and so on. But again, I think it's the ideal is a mix between passive and some kind of active liveness detection.
Yeah. And you mentioned multi-modality earlier on in your presentation. Yeah. And personally, I really like the combination of face and voice. It's it's very natural, and it does, as you said, it can improve accuracy levels and deter some of these spoof attacks. So we're used to seeing biometrics for authentication, but not so much for signature purposes. So what are the advantages, if any, over other more extending mechanisms such as OTP sent over SMS, digital certificates, etc.?
Yeah, I think that's interesting because it's one of the things that is probably been more interesting for our clients. Is that, of course, if we compare it with digital certificates, the advantage is usability, is convenience. It's much easier to use biometric signature than using digital certificates nowadays. Digital certificates, I don't know, it's in all the countries, but in many countries it's a nightmare to get them working. So definitely biometric signatures are much easier. If we are talking about OTPs, these kind of codes, one-time passwords, they send you over SMS. They are quite convenient. It's not hard to use. But then from the legal point of view, there is always a weak link. And the link is, okay, you are able to prove with a lot of confidence that you sent an SMS to a specific device and that code was read by somebody. Then there's no clear that you can prove that this person was you and another person using that device. Maybe the device, the mobile device is from the company, or maybe you can say, okay, I didn't read this, I didn't use it. So with biometrics, you have that extra link. You have the link with the device, that in addition, you have the link with that person. So it's still very convenient. And if you have to go, if there is some problem with that signature, you have a lot of confidence to prove that it was really a specific person, not just a specific device.
Yeah, I understand. I don't know whether it's the same for you in Spain, but here in the UK, I'm as a result of PSD2 SCA, strong customer authentication regs, I'm seeing an absolute huge rise in receiving OTPs via SMS for payment or authorization authentication. It's gone through the roof, and it is, okay, it is adding that, a little bit of grit in the process, and I'm sure it's helping against fraud. But from a usability point of view, it's a bit of a pain in the butt, really, I must admit.
Yeah, absolutely. And also, let's not forget that the attacks are also evolving on that side. So the SIM swapping attacks are very real right now. We are working now with a telco company specifically to use biometrics to avoid this kind of SIM swapping attacks. So yeah, I think again, in a few years' time, probably the OTPs sent by SMS will be a thing of the past.
Yeah, and also there's a comment here from someone who lives in the Cotswolds, which is a country area in the west of England. It also assumes you have a signal. So
okay, nice. That's
something for Ofcom, I think, Elizabeth. So I'm going to. So your presentation was built on that evolution of development of you as a company, and also meeting your customer requirements in developing new technology based around biometrics and to meet that customer need, which is fantastic. So what do you think about the next steps in the evolution of these systems?
Yeah, and that's a good question also. I think I would like to have a magic ball to to know it.
It's my job, I think.
Yeah. My personal view is that it's going to evolve on the line of passive authentication and passive and continuous authentication. I think we are carrying our smartphones with us. They have a lot of sensors. They can be analyzing our voice, the way we walk, the way we type, the cameras. So I think it's going to be more we will be continuously authenticated in a passive way. We won't need to do a active authentication right now, because right now I'm going to do this transaction. When you are going to do this transaction, your device will know with a lot of confidence if it's you or not. If it knows it's you, probably it won't require any additional authentication. So you will just do your transactions seamlessly without any authentication step, because your phone will be continuously authenticating all the time. And if the smartphone doesn't have all the confidence required, then let's challenge the user with additional authentication. But if the smartphone is very confident, okay, I'm hearing the voice, I'm seeing the face, I'm seeing the way he walks, the way he types, the way he unlocks the screen, everything, I know it's you, so I won't require any additional authentication. I think that's
yeah, no, that's really. I think I think we're nearly there. I think technology. I think it's with a combination in the multimodal, combining behavioural as well. We have a session this afternoon on looking at behavioural as a really adaptable kind of modality, because it can be used for fraud detection, it can be used for authentication, it can be used as part of the onboarding process, again, to kind of detect if it's a bot or a rat, etc. So I think I really concur with that. Things to reduce the friction, but to maintain levels of security and risk profiles, I think is the way forward. Fantastic.
Absolutely.
operating in the EU, and we've done a bit of work on looking at biometrics and in relation to data protection and privacy regulation. So how do you work so that you're compliant with the GDPR?
Yeah, GDPR definitely. Being in the EU is, I think, it's great because it forces us to be very prepared, and we have to be always with a privacy point of view in mind. And privacy is the first option. It's not just something you think at the end of the process. You have to be designing the solutions with privacy in mind since the very beginning. And so when you go to other with other markets, with other countries with not so strict privacy rules, then yeah, you have done all your homework. So it's easier to go to these countries because you already comply with GDPR. Yeah. Again, basically, I think the main thing is to have privacy in mind from the very beginning, and that means designing technologies that are always encrypted, that are not reversible, that are revocable in case that there is some kind of leak, that you can revoke those biometric templates, that information. And of course, we also have a team of legal advisors that are very are top in their field. They help our clients to adapt to GDPR requirements. Thing that also helps our clients is that sometimes we do have our service in a cloud. We can provide it on a cloud based. But we also can, for some use cases, it makes sense to have for them to have them on their own premises, on their own data centers. So we can provide the technology and they can install it on their own premises. So they don't need to share any data with us. And that makes adoption of compliance with GDPR easier for them.
Okay, so I know you operate in many international countries, and I know that you're active in Central and South America. So what is your experience in working in these countries, and how do they differ from each other in terms of the types of technology and the way it's deployed?
I think it's curious because when we started this like 12 years ago, we were seeing more cultural differences approaching to different biometric modalities. We were really seeing those differences between some countries and others. But I think after, all the smartphones now include biometrics, Apple launched Touch ID, Face ID. So now it's so common that we don't see those differences anymore in that sense. Right now, we see the differences sometimes regarding, we were talking before about on-device or cloud-based or server-based. And that's something, it's an issue for some countries. If you don't have a good connection, good data connection, then offline, doing it offline on the device becomes much more important than in other places. So that's one of the differences. And then, yeah, differences between the legal framework that you need to take into account, but not so many cultural differences right now, in our opinion. I don't see that as much as when we started some years ago.
Okay, that's very interesting, really, and obviously makes it easier for a supplier because you don't have to adapt and to do a lot of system integration. So yeah. So thank you, Jose Luis. We have sadly run out of time for this session. So a big thank you to you for your insight, and the audience for some really great questions.